A just transition means not replicating destructive and extractive practices of the fossil fuel corporations. As a part of this transition, we recognize that wind energy cannot come without the input of fishing communities and other frontline communities who represent important fixtures of Maine coastal identity. Offshore wind has the potential to produce an incredible amount of renewable energy with a relatively small footprint. Wind energy is renewable and can be used indefinitely. We believe offshore wind is an important first step to a complete transition away from fossil fuels to ensure a livable planet for us and future generations. The offshore wind bill this session, currently LR 741, sponsored by Senator Lawrence, could account for as much as 50% of the state's energy needs over the next few decades, taking into account electrification mandates from the administration's plan. The passage of this bill would give the state of Maine and other stakeholders an important say in how this industry develops in Maine. Mainers would be able to ensure high standards for the environment, high standards for workers, and ensure the benefits are distributed equitably. Offshore wind is good for Mainers because of the following reasons. First, Mainers are contending with highly volatile energy rates that the fossil fuel market creates. Producing our own offshore wind energy will stabilize oil prices by curbing our over-reliance on expensive imported natural gas to produce electricity in Maine. Second, this bill would provide additional lifelong careers and benefits for Mainers. It has strong labor provisions, including training programs, workforce diversity requirements, and high workers' rights standards. We have the opportunity here to create a competitive, unionized workforce in the renewable energy sector in Maine. It should be the state's goal to keep Maine residents in Maine with a stable, lifelong career and retirement. Offshore wind can help the state fulfill this goal while simultaneously transitioning away from the fossil fuel industry. Third, this bill adopts some of the most important recommendations from the fishing industry and funds wildlife and environmental research and protections to ensure that the Gulf of Maine's ecosystem and those that depend on it see as few impacts as possible. We recognize the perceived socioeconomic, environmental, and political impacts of offshore wind, and we take these concerns very seriously. This fall, Maine Youth Climate Justice hosted a speaker series with various offshore wind experts, including engineers, educators, environmentalists, fishing advocates, and others, to better understand the broad variety of concerns, as well as recommendations for this multifaceted issue. It's important for stakeholders and frontline communities to be included in the planning and decision-making processes that affect them. Maine Youth Climate Justice is advocating for offshore wind at the state and regional level. We are determined to push both the Mills Administration and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management to meet higher standards for community and tribal engagement and inclusion in this transition. This bill, which must be passed this session, will ensure a strong start to the transition to renewable energy and give the state of Maine more control over siting, fisheries, protections, labor standards, and more. We also support the Ports Bill, LD 1818, which sets high standards of environmental protection, as we recognize that having a port in Maine is critical for Maine residents to benefit from offshore wind.